You've spent your whole life praying to the sky, hoping that maybe this time heaven will hear you. But what if the voice you've been waiting for was never up there? What if the presence you've been searching for has been whispering through your every breath, your every thought, your every heartbeat? Neville Goddard dared to say what religion never did, that God isn't watching you. God is being you. The awareness that says I am is the same creative power that imagined the stars into existence. And once you grasp this truth, everything changes. You stop begging for miracles and start becoming them. This isn't just another spiritual idea, it's a complete inversion of how we've been taught to live. Because if your consciousness is the one source, then every assumption you hold is a divine command. You don't need to wait for proof, you need to assume the wish fulfilled. And when that realization hits you, not as theory but as experience, you'll understand why Neville said, feeling is the secret. Because it's not about believing in a God out there, it's about awakening to the God within. Most people spend their entire lives searching for something out there, a miracle in the clouds, a sign from heaven, a whisper from above. But what if the silence you hear isn't absence, it's invitation? The turning point comes when you stop looking up and start looking in. Neville Goddard said that true spiritual awakening begins the moment you recognize that your consciousness is the temple, not a distant sky. It's almost poetic, how we chase the divine the same way a fish might look for the ocean. We pray, plead, and wait for something already surrounding us. This is the paradox Neville exposed through his teachings, that awareness itself is God, quietly pulsing behind every thought. And the moment you recognize it, the search collapses. You're not separated, you're submerged. Think of it like tuning a radio. For years we've turned the dial hoping to find God on some frequency far away, when all along the station was broadcasting from within. The static? That's doubt. The clear signal? That's awareness. The moment you notice that every thought, feeling, and assumption arises from the same source, the one you call I am, something shifts forever. Many grew up hearing, God is watching you. It planted a subtle fear, as if an external judge waited for you to fail. But Neville's realization flipped the entire script. God isn't watching you. God is being you. The awareness behind your eyes, the consciousness that observes every thought, is the very presence you've been praying to. When you stop searching, something profound happens. You start seeing. The trees, the sky, the strangers walking past, all move within your consciousness. You realize creation isn't happening to you, it's unfolding through you. Every sunrise becomes an intimate message. You and I were never two. It's not a theory, it's an experience. Sit quietly and notice the stillness before a thought appears. That silence, alive and aware, is the one source. Not an entity outside space and time, but the quiet foundation of all that exists. Once you sense it, even for a moment, it's impossible to unsee. When you wake up to this awareness, prayer stops being a desperate request. It becomes a deep remembering. You no longer beg, you align. You no longer chase signs, you embody them. Because the divine isn't a visitor, it's the host, and you've been living in its house all along. The irony is, when people stop looking for God out there, they often feel a brief emptiness, as if something's missing. But that emptiness isn't absence, it's spaciousness. It's the moment your inner world expands enough to let truth enter, the moment the old image of a distant deity dissolves into something infinitely closer. This awakening doesn't make life easier at first, it makes it real. You begin to see that your outer world mirrors your inner assumptions. Your consciousness creates. Every belief about separation, lack, or fear manifests as the reflection you live within. But awareness dissolves the illusion. So the great shift isn't about finding God, it's about remembering what you've always been. When you finally recognize the divine within, everything around you rearranges to match that knowing. And that's when Neville's next revelation begins to unfold. When Neville Goddard declared that I am is the name of God, he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was revealing the most direct key to creation itself. Think about it. Every sentence that defines your life begins with those two words. I am tired. I am blessed. I am broke. I am abundant. Each phrase becomes a seed planted in the fertile soil of your consciousness. The simple act of saying I am is an act of creation. Before any manifestation appears, there must first be awareness claiming existence. This is what Neville meant by the power of assumption. You assume the identity, and reality organizes itself around that assumption. You live in the end, and the end becomes alive through you. It's so easy to underestimate those two words because we repeat them without awareness. But every I am carries a command. It's the decree of the God within, shaping the invisible energy that later hardens into fact. When you say, I am unlucky, your world faithfully obeys. When you say, I am favored, the same law responds, with equal precision. Most people think prayer is about words said to the sky, but Neville's law of assumption redefines prayer as identity. You don't beg for change, you become the change. You don't wait for proof, you assume the wish fulfilled. That shift in consciousness is the real miracle. Once it happens, physical results are inevitable. Remember how children play make-believe. They don't pretend as a game, they embody the role completely. For them, imagination isn't fantasy, it's reality. Neville called this the secret adults forget. Imagination creates reality. Whatever you accept as true in the state of I am becomes your world tomorrow. Imagine a man saying, I am always struggling. That's not a description, it's a declaration. It's an unconscious prayer to remain in that vibration. Now imagine him saying, I am learning to see abundance everywhere. That's a new identity. The moment that assumption takes root, new opportunities begin to echo back from the world. Your I am is the author of your script. Every scene in your life follows the tone you set with those words. That's why Neville insisted that we watch what follows them closely, because life doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to what you assume yourself to be. Desire only becomes real when it's claimed as identity. People often ask, but isn't that just positive thinking? Not at all. Positive thinking tries to convince the mind. Assumption transforms the state. You don't need to force optimism when you feel truth as real. When you say I am wealthy and feel it as done, you're not lying, you're remembering your creative nature. Once this realization sinks in, even daily speech becomes sacred. You start catching yourself mid-sentence, aware that every I am is shaping tomorrow. It's not superstition, it's spiritual precision. The words you speak are the ripples of consciousness, and your consciousness is the ocean of God. So the question shifts from how do I get what I want to who am I being right now? Because if I am is the name of God, then whatever follows it is the face of your creation. And the next step Neville revealed goes even deeper. What happens when we stop seeing that power as something separate at all? Most of us were taught to picture God as a mighty figure seated somewhere beyond the clouds, deciding who succeeds, who fails, who gets healed, who suffers. It sounds comforting, but it secretly builds dependence. When you believe the source is far away, you also believe that you're small, unworthy, and waiting for permission to rise. That illusion of distance is the first veil of forgetfulness. Neville Goddard's teachings shattered that illusion. He showed that this distant judge in the sky was never real. It was a reflection of human misunderstanding. The truth, awareness, is God. The very consciousness that animates you is the same life force that shapes galaxies. There's no border between the divine and your existence, only the wall of belief in separation. It's like watching a movie and forgetting you're the one holding the remote. You get lost in the drama, screaming at the screen, forgetting that you could pause, rewind, or change the channel entirely. The moment you remember that your consciousness creates reality, you reclaim authorship of your story. Fate stops being punishment. It becomes feedback. Separation isn't just a spiritual idea, it's a psychological prison. The person who thinks, God will decide for me, unconsciously abdicates responsibility. But the one who realizes, I am the awareness through which life moves, reclaims infinite power. The difference isn't arrogance, it's awakening. It's the discovery that the God within is the same one you once begged to intervene. When you expect an outer savior to fix your life, you live in waiting. And waiting is the opposite of creation. It's a subtle way of saying, I'm not yet worthy. But when you feel from unity, you no longer ask for proof. You express truth. You act from the knowing that the power to heal, create, and transform has always been an inside job. This doesn't mean arrogance or denial. It means alignment. The rain doesn't beg to fall. It expresses its nature. The flower doesn't pray to bloom. It unfolds because blooming is what it is. In the same way, your soul's natural state is expansion. When you remember who you are, you stop pleading for miracles and start being one. The tragedy of religion misinterpreted is that it turned relationship into hierarchy. Humanity was taught to look up instead of in, to beg instead of embody. But Neville's manifestation truth was revolutionary. God isn't the distant Father you call on, it's the awareness breathing your name this very second. You've probably noticed that when you feel disconnected, when you say, "I can't do this," life mirrors that belief back. But when you quietly affirm, "I and the Father are one," your world starts bending in your favor. Not because someone decided to bless you, but because you stop denying the source that's already blessing you through consciousness. Every time you imagine a distant power, you create emotional distance too. Hope turns to helplessness. But when you turn inward and recognize the one source pulsing behind every heartbeat, fear melts. You no longer chase approval from heaven, you become its expression on earth. And that realization, that you were never separate to begin with, becomes the doorway to a new kind of prayer. Not the prayer of pleading, but of knowing. Not, "Please God," but, "Thank you, I am." Which leads us to the next awakening. When you realize that prayer itself transforms from asking to aligning. There's a quiet revolution that happens inside once you realize that awareness is not something you use, it's what you are. From that moment on, prayer stops sounding like begging and starts feeling like remembering. Neville Goddard called it assuming the wish fulfilled, but at its heart, it's the art of identifying with the divine instead of asking it for favors. Most people pray from lack, "Please make it happen," but when you know that awareness is God, you stop reaching outward and start tuning inward. You don't ask for abundance. You feel what it's like to already live in it. You don't plead for love. You rest in the knowing that love flows through your very being. That subtle inner shift changes everything. Prayer, in its truest form, isn't a conversation between a human and a deity. It's a merging of awareness with its own creation. It's not about convincing God to act. It's about conscious creation through the power of assumption. You align with what already exists in potential and let your outer life rise to match your inner state. Neville often said, "Feeling is the secret," because no matter how many times you repeat affirmations, if your feeling remains rooted in doubt, you're still praying from separation. But when you feel from the state of fulfillment, the law responds instantly. You've stopped asking and started embodying. That's when miracles become routine. Think about it like a thermostat. When you change the setting, the environment adjusts itself naturally. You don't chase the temperature, you align it. In the same way, when your inner state aligns with the desired reality, the world reshapes to match. That's living in the end. Prayer as calibration, not desperation. Once you understand this, the language of prayer changes. It's no longer, "God, give me strength." It becomes, "I am strength expressing itself." No longer, "Please heal me," but "I am wholeness unfolding." This isn't arrogance, it's awareness. It's the end of pleading and the beginning of partnership between creator and creation. Many find this hard to grasp because it removes the comfort of dependency. To pray as alignment means you can no longer wait for life to fix itself. You must become the one who embodies the fix. But that's the beauty of the law of assumption. The moment you assume, life begins to organize around that identity, gently proving your divinity to you. Sometimes people say, "But I tried this and nothing changed." The truth? You can't try to be what you already are. It's not about effort, it's about surrender. The feeling of trying still carries separation. True prayer feels like quiet certainty, a peaceful knowing that your assumption is already fact in the invisible. When you begin praying from this awareness, you notice an effortless peace. You no longer feel the anxiety of waiting. You start to understand why Neville called faith loyalty to the unseen. Because when you dwell in the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you're not hoping, it's already done. You've aligned your consciousness with creation itself, and as this way of praying deepens, something even more profound emerges. You begin to realize that every assumption you hold, every belief you entertain, is itself a decree of the God within you, and that's where the next revelation unfolds. Neville Goddard used to say that assumption, if persisted in, will harden into fact. At first it sounds poetic, until you start to see it working in your life. Every assumption, whether loving or fearful, is a divine command issued by your own consciousness. You assume the state, and reality obeys. The law of assumption is not a theory, it's the mechanism behind manifestation itself. You've experienced this countless times without realizing it. Think of a morning when you knew it would be a bad day, before anything even happened. Sure enough, the day unfolded to confirm that assumption. The same law that made things go wrong can make everything align perfectly. Your consciousness never stops creating. It only mirrors what you believe. This is why Neville called awareness the name of God. Whatever awareness declares as true, the world reflects. When you say, "Nothing ever works out for me," it's not just a complaint, it's a prayer. When you say, "Things always find a way to flow in my favor," it's not just optimism, it's decree. Imagination creates reality because assumption gives it shape. You can think of assumption like planting a seed. The soil doesn't question whether it's worthy to grow. Whatever you plant, it nurtures. Consciousness works the same way. It doesn't judge right or wrong, deserving or undeserving. It simply says yes. That's why awareness without self-understanding can feel chaotic. It's infinite power used unconsciously. The good news is that awareness can be redirected. The moment you identify a limiting assumption, you can replace it, not by fighting it, but by quietly assuming a new truth. "I am anxious" can become "I am calm and guided." "I am lost" can become "I am exactly where I need to be." It's not mental gymnastics, it's divine authorship. This doesn't mean you'll never doubt again, it means you'll recognize doubt as what it is, an old assumption surfacing for review. When you stay loyal to your chosen state, reality eventually forgets the old script and obeys the new one. That's what Neville meant when he said, "Persist in the assumption that it is already done." A simple way to test this: assume that every person you meet today is kind. Not hope, assume. Walk through your day as if kindness were the natural atmosphere. Watch how people begin to respond differently. They're not changing, you are. Your consciousness is rearranging what you see to match what you feel to be true. Every assumption carries emotional energy, and emotion is the evidence that you've accepted it as real. When you feel gratitude for something not yet visible, you've already stepped into the state of the wish fulfilled. The outer world will take care of itself, it must, because awareness has spoken, and awareness is God. When you start to live from this truth, even challenges lose their sting. You see them not as punishment, but as reflections of assumptions ready to be released. Life becomes a mirror, not of who you want to be, but of who you believe you are. And every reflection invites you to assume again, consciously this time. Each assumption then becomes sacred, a declaration of divine will made through human awareness. And the deeper this realization sinks in, the more natural it becomes to pause throughout the day, feel "I am," and rest in that presence behind every thought. Which leads us into the next practice. Neville Goddard often reminded his students that spirituality isn't about constant activity. It's about conscious stillness. Every day offers hundreds of moments to pause and reconnect with your consciousness, the true one source behind all creation. You don't need candles or rituals. All you need is awareness itself, the quiet recognition of "I am." Try this right now. Take a breath and notice the awareness that's noticing. That silent observer, the one behind your thoughts, is not small or human. It's the God within. It never changes even when your emotions do. When you rest in that stillness, your thoughts lose power, and what remains is pure presence, divine and unshakable. This is what Neville meant when he said to feel "I am." It's not about repeating affirmations mechanically, it's about sensing the life force that says, "I exist." In that moment, there's no past or future, only awareness being aware of itself. That's prayer in its highest form, communion without words, alignment without effort. When life feels chaotic, it's easy to forget this simple truth. We rush, worry, and react as if peace is somewhere to be found later. But in reality, peace is the background of every moment. You just have to turn toward it. Like quiet music always playing in another room, it's been waiting for you to listen. The daily practice isn't about escaping the world. It's about returning to the center of it. When you pause and feel "I am," the noise of fear and striving fades. The mind might still chatter, but it's like waves on the surface of a still ocean. Beneath it all, your awareness remains untouched, eternal, grounded, and clear. People often ask, "How long should I meditate?" Neville would say, "Until you feel the reality of your assumption." But here, it's even simpler. Pause until you remember who you are. A minute is enough. 5 seconds is enough. The duration doesn't matter. The recognition does. In that stillness, the entire law of assumption comes alive. This moment of awareness resets everything. Suddenly, problems seem smaller because you've remembered the one witnessing them is infinite. That's spiritual awakening in its purest form, realizing you were never the storm, only the sky. You begin to move through life not as a seeker, but as the silent creator behind the scenes. Even in mundane situations, waiting in line, washing dishes, scrolling your phone, You can practice this pause. Ask inwardly, who is aware right now? Feel the aliveness in your body, the consciousness observing everything. That's your source. The same power Neville called God, the awareness that imagines and sustains all reality. The more you rest in this stillness, the more your outer world softens. Reactions turn into responses, stress turns into clarity, and action becomes inspired instead of forced. Life begins to flow naturally because you've stopped pushing the river and realized you are the river. And from this daily communion with awareness, something profound begins to unfold. Fear starts to dissolve, because when you're rooted in unity instead of separation, you no longer wonder if God will answer. You realize you are the answer in motion. Fear thrives in the space between me and God. The moment you believe there's a gap, anxiety rushes in to fill it. You start wondering if your prayers will reach the heavens, if your desires are heard, if you're worthy enough. But once you realize that your consciousness is God, that separation collapses, and fear has nowhere to live. Neville Goddard said, "The real transformation happens when you feel from your wish fulfilled, not for it." That single preposition changes everything. To feel for it means you're outside the state, still hoping, still waiting. To feel from it means you're already inside the answered prayer, living in its atmosphere. That's when confidence replaces fear, because the end is already done. Think of a child pretending to be a superhero. They don't worry if they're doing it right. They simply become it. That same ease is what the law of assumption asks of you. When you feel from unity, you're no longer acting as if, you're embodying I am. And when you dwell in that feeling long enough, the world aligns to reflect it. Fear only survives when you believe the power is elsewhere. But the moment you embody your divine identity, fear dissolves like mist under sunlight. You stop waiting for signs that God has heard you because you realize you are the movement through which God answers. Awareness is God, and you are that awareness in expression. When you feel from unity, life becomes less about control and more about cooperation. You stop fighting circumstances and start flowing with them. Even challenges lose their threat because you know they're not punishments. They're feedback from consciousness. They show you where you've assumed something less than your true nature. Neville's students often asked how to overcome doubt. His answer was simple: stop fighting it, replace it. You don't wrestle with fear, you transcend it by assuming the state of faith. It's like switching stations on a radio. You don't argue with static, you tune to a clearer frequency. That frequency is unity, and its signal is peace. When you rest in that peace, even your body feels different. The breath deepens, the mind quiets. You sense a calm authority, the kind that doesn't need proof to know it's real. This is the fruit of living from awareness rather than separation. You've stopped asking life to cooperate. You've remembered it already does. Living in unity doesn't mean ignoring pain. It means no longer identifying with it. You can acknowledge a problem without giving it power, because deep down, you know the one observing the storm is untouched by it. That observer is the God within, watching creation rearrange itself to your assumption of peace. Once fear loses its throne, something extraordinary happens: effortless confidence. You move through life with quiet certainty, not because you're forcing optimism, but because you feel truth as your natural state. The need to ask, will it happen, disappears, replaced by a deep knowing. It's already unfolding. And as this confidence matures, a new pattern begins to emerge, one where your outer world mirrors your inner calm instantly. You start to notice signs of awakening everywhere. That unshakable peace, that subtle authority, that flow where effort once lived. There comes a moment when you no longer need external confirmation. You simply know. It's not arrogance, it's clarity. Neville Goddard called this state living from the end, where doubt dissolves because your inner world has already accepted the result. You walk differently, speak differently, breathe differently. That quiet authority isn't learned, it's remembered. You'll notice that anxiety no longer lingers the way it used to. Situations that once triggered panic now feel oddly neutral. It's not that you stopped caring, it's that you've begun to see from the perspective of your consciousness, the one source directing all things. The storm still moves, but you've discovered the calm eye at its center. The first sign of awakening is peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. You might still have bills, conversations, or deadlines, yet beneath it all there's an unshakable knowing. I am. That presence outlasts every challenge. It's the realization that awareness is God, and that nothing happening outside can disturb what's infinite inside. Then comes the second sign, effortless confidence. You stop over-planning and start trusting. Opportunities seem to appear at the exact moment you need them. People describe it as luck, but it's simply the law of assumption at work. Your consciousness arranging reality according to your self-concept. You've stopped chasing, you've started attracting. This new rhythm feels almost supernatural. You think of someone and they text you. You imagine peace and chaos settles. It's not coincidence, it's coherence. When your inner state and outer world begin to mirror one another seamlessly, you realize imagination creates reality, and that realization changes how you move through every day. Another sign of awakening is your relationship with silence. Before, silence felt uncomfortable, an absence to be filled. Now it feels sacred, like coming home. You find yourself craving stillness not because you're escaping life, but because you recognize it as life's origin point. In silence, the God within whispers louder than any word. You also begin to sense energy in others differently. Instead of reacting, you perceive. You see beyond appearances. The co-worker who used to irritate you becomes a mirror of an old assumption. The obstacle that once scared you turns into a lesson in awareness. It's as if the world starts speaking your language, the language of consciousness. And perhaps the most beautiful sign of all, gratitude appears without reason. You wake up feeling thankful before anything has happened. That gratitude isn't for possessions, it's for awareness itself. You realize that just to be is the ultimate miracle. It's the same joy Neville radiated when he said, "I am all imagination, and that is God." As awakening deepens, life feels lighter. You stop forcing outcomes and start letting them unfold. Action flows from inspiration, not fear. You begin to trust your impulses because they arise from unity, not separation. It's not about control, it's about cooperation with the divine rhythm already playing through you. And from this effortless dance of awareness and form, you start to see the ultimate truth unfold before your eyes. That creation and creator were never two separate things. Every moment, every event, every reflection is consciousness expressing itself as you. Once you've glimpsed the truth that awareness is God, the next step isn't learning more, it's embodying it. Deep embodiment means this knowledge stops being an idea and becomes your natural way of being. You no longer talk about consciousness, you live it. Every reaction, every emotion, every choice becomes a reflection of what you've accepted as real inside. Neville Goddard called this the fusion of imagination and feeling. It's not enough to say, "I believe." You must feel it so deeply that your body, tone, and behavior reflect that belief effortlessly. You can't fake vibration. The world doesn't respond to your words. It mirrors your state of being. You can't speak abundance while feeling lack and expect wealth to appear. Imagine a mirror. You can't smile at it and expect it to grin first. You must smile to see the reflection. Life works the same way. The outer world only reflects what your awareness is doing in silence. That's why Neville said to stop complaining about circumstances. They're simply your assumptions turned visible. When you truly embody unity, you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start seeing, "What in me is this reflecting?" That single shift turns pain into revelation. Every difficult situation becomes feedback from the mirror of creation. And with that understanding, guilt disappears. You realize you were never being punished, only reminded. Embodiment isn't about perfection, it's about presence. It's walking into a room and knowing that your energy sets the tone before you even speak. It's treating small moments, like waiting in traffic or talking to a stranger, as opportunities to express your chosen state. Your consciousness leads, form follows. You might notice that as your awareness expands, certain things start falling away. Habits, relationships, even beliefs. Don't resist it. Old versions of you can't survive in new frequencies. This shedding isn't loss, it's refinement. It's the universe making space for the identity you've chosen to assume. Deep embodiment also means you stop fighting appearances. When a challenge arises, you no longer rush to fix it externally. You turn inward, adjust the assumption, and let reality rearrange itself. The peace that comes from this is extraordinary. You realize that the external world is simply your inner movie projected on a larger screen. You'll find that words become softer and energy stronger. People start saying things like, "You've changed," or "You feel different." They can't quite explain it, but they sense it. That's the God within expressing itself more fully. You're no longer pretending to be divine, you're remembering that you always were. Neville used to say, "Your world is yourself pushed out." It's one of those phrases that sounds mystical until you live it. Then it becomes obvious. Every smile, every conflict, every coincidence carries your signature. Life is a mirror so intimate that you can't escape your reflection, and once you love it, it loves you back tenfold. And this understanding leads to the final revelation, the moment when the illusion of distance between God and creation dissolves completely. You no longer say, "God is with me." You know with quiet certainty, God is me, the awareness living, breathing, and creating through every assumption you make. At last, everything returns to where it began, awareness. What Neville Goddard spent his life teaching wasn't religion, it was remembrance. God isn't outside you, it's your consciousness quietly animating every moment. The voice inside that says, "I am," is not separate from the divine. It is the divine expressing through human form. To recognize this is to come home. Once you understand that, life stops being something to control and becomes something to create consciously. Each thought, each feeling, each assumption becomes sacred because it carries the authority of God. When you assume abundance, that's not wishful thinking. It's divinity declaring itself in form. Every assumption is a brushstroke on the canvas of reality. This realization doesn't make you superior, it makes you responsible. You start to see that blaming circumstances or people is like arguing with your own reflection. The power was never out there. The world is a mirror reflecting the tone of your awareness. The moment you own that truth, you reclaim creation itself. Think of how effortlessly nature expresses itself. The sun doesn't try to shine, it just does. In the same way, your true self doesn't need to strive. It only needs to remember. That remembrance turns ordinary thoughts into divine decrees. You begin to feel the quiet confidence of someone who knows that their imagination isn't fantasy. It's the creative power of God. When you walk through life with this awareness, every challenge becomes an invitation to express your divinity. Lack invites the assumption of abundance. Fear invites the assumption of love. Conflict invites the assumption of peace. You stop reacting and start recreating. The entire universe bends to the quality of your assumption because it recognizes its author, you. Owning this truth means letting go of excuses. You can't claim both victimhood and divine authorship at the same time. But the moment you accept that feeling is the secret, creation becomes effortless. You no longer chase manifestations, you feel them real. That's how the invisible becomes visible, through awareness, clothed in conviction. This is what Neville meant by conscious creation. It's not manipulation, it's alignment. You don't change the outer world by force, you shift the inner world by assumption. And when consciousness moves, form follows. The power of assumption isn't something you turn on. It's the way reality always worked. Now you're simply awake to it. There's an incredible peace that comes with this knowing. You realize that nothing is missing, nothing is broken, and nothing is withheld. The same presence that imagined galaxies imagines your next breath. When you pause and feel "I am," you're touching the heartbeat of God. It's not far, it's here, now, in you. From this place, prayer becomes creation, and creation becomes gratitude. You start to live as an artist of consciousness, painting realities through assumption and emotion. You see beauty in contrast, lessons in challenge, love in every reflection. The world doesn't intimidate you anymore. It inspires you to imagine higher. And as this understanding fully anchors in you, separation dissolves completely. You stop saying, "I'm seeking God," and begin saying, "I am." That awareness is the source, the truth behind every manifestation, the living proof that heaven was never a place to reach. It was a state to remember. So now the question is, will you keep searching for a God outside of you? Or will you finally recognize the one that's been breathing through you all along? Every moment, every emotion, every thought is an act of creation. You've never been waiting for a miracle. You are the miracle waiting to be remembered. What if tonight, instead of praying for something to change, you simply whispered, "I am"? What would happen if you walked through life knowing that your awareness is divine, that your imagination is sacred, and that everything you assume becomes reality? Let this message linger. Let it rewire how you speak to yourself, how you see the world, how you create. Because once you live from the truth that God is your awareness, you'll never pray the same way again. You'll live as prayer itself. If this message awakened something in you, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep learning how to embody the teachings of Neville Goddard. Every video here is a step deeper into conscious creation, the art of living as the divine you already are.